Hello, everyone, and good afternoon from Dubai. Is my audio clear? The- Am I audible to you? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome to our 69th live webinar. My name is Mylin Chan, and I am delighted to be here with you today alongside the TDCC training team. We are excited to bring you another interesting topic today: building confidence, focus, and emotional resilience across all ages. On behalf of TDCC, we would like to thank our 136 advocates coming from 13 countries who registered for this session. And to those who have joined us live, thank you for your time and presence. We would like to acknowledge our registrants from Australia. We have from Egypt, India, Iraq, Germany, Nigeria, Oman, Pakistan, Philippines, Qatar. We have from South Africa, United Kingdom, and the UAE. So, wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Before we begin, let me share a short video with you about TDCC and our team speaker for today. Thank you.
With autism. Welcome to the TDCC Community Live webinar.
TDCC stands for the Developing Child Center located in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, UAE.
Established in 2012. We have been providing personalized support to over 1,000 children. We have 60 dedicated and committed experts, and we work closely with parents and schools to ensure no child is left behind. We think different, we teach different. We empower, not limit children. Labels like autism, dyslexia, and ADHD are not relevant or perceived as disabilities, difficulties, or disorders that limit children's abilities. We believe that brilliance needs difference. The TDCC services are available in English, French, and Arabic. The inclusive educational services nurture and support the developmental and educational needs and help empower each child to reach their full potential. Occupational therapy assists children in performing and achieving important learning and developmental skills they need in life. Psychomotor therapy is a healthcare profession that is based on a holistic view of the person and is involved in the treatment of different disorders. Speech and language therapy assists children who have disorders of speech, language, communication, and swallowing. Psychology provides both educational and clinical services, including counseling and parenting. ABA therapy focuses on improving specific behaviors. It is commonly practiced as a therapeutic intervention for individuals with autism. Specialist learning support. We assist in developing the academic and social development of students who need support in all these areas. And we design and host local and international training and workshops for practitioners, parents, caregivers, and educators. Just like this one today. We have a few rules to follow during the webinar. Please remain muted while the speaker is presenting. Please give your full attention to the presentation. We will be sending you the replay, so you can review it anytime. Please be interactive if the speaker requests your participation. During the question and answer session, we kindly request everyone to type their questions in the chat box and the speaker will address them.
Welcome to the 69th live webinar on building confidence, focus, and emotional resilience across all ages. TDCC is honored to welcome back Debbie Gilmore, a dedicated educational leader, for another insightful session in our webinar series. As the Executive Director of the Arrowsmith Program, Debbie brings a wealth of experience as a teacher, principal, and administrator. With a master's in education and graduate certifications in diverse learning, she is deeply passionate about the brain's role in learning and student success. Debbie has been a strong advocate for integrating neuroplastic programming into education to enhance cognitive functioning and foster lifelong learners. She pioneered an initiative to bring the Arrowsmith program to schools and has since led its strategic growth, championing its transformative impact on students' lives. As both an educator and a parent, Debbie has witnessed firsthand the life-changing potential of the program for students and the communities that support them. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Debbie Gilmore.
Hello, Debbie. How are you?
I'm very well, Mylene. Thank you so much for having me back again. I'm really, really excited to be back with the TDCC community to talk on this topic. So let me share my screen. Let me see here. This is what I want to show. Here we are. Can everyone see that?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So it's really lovely to be here and talking on this topic. And as Mylene said, this is a series of webinars that the TDCC and I have been doing together for a number of months now. And I want to let everyone know that those previous webinars are available on this link that you see on my screen on TDCC's website. And I will tell you a little bit more about that at the end of my session, because I think you might want to go back and have a look at a couple in particular that are related to today's topic. And as you can see, we have another one coming up in November, and then a series will also continue in next year. So this is what I hope to cover today in the next 60 minutes that we have together, looking at how we can build confidence, focus, and emotional resilience. I have to say thank you so much for your questions that you sent through, which I used to develop today's webinar. I always find that really useful. And Mylene, thank you so much, as always, for sending those through. This is what I hope to cover. I really ask, if you have any other questions, please pop them in the chat. During my presentation today, I will ask you to be jotting some things in the chat just to help the points and help your thinking and learning around this topic and sharing with others. So I will be asking you to do that. So if you've got your keyboard handy, please help along the way. So how do we observe confidence, focus, and emotional resilience? In fact, what do we mean by it? Those words. I think when we say them in a sentence, we understand what they mean, but really, how do we observe it? How do we observe it in ourselves? How do we detect it in other people, in our children, in our students? Well, sometimes it can look like some of these things. What makes us confident? Is it because we're good at certain things? We have a perception of ourselves as being good at certain things, which makes us confident. Is it because we understand what's happening in the world around us? We're good at particular tasks that we're being asked to do. What does focus look like? What helps us focus? Is it because we're interested in something? Our children interested in something? Is it that what keeps us focused? Is it because we're curious about that particular thing that we're doing? Is it because we've set a goal that we want to achieve. So we keep very focused on that goal. And then likewise, what does emotional resilience mean for us? How does that show up? How do we detect that in ourselves, or can we observe it in others? Does it mean when we're feeling emotionally resilient that we feel good about ourselves, that we have a growth mindset, that we strive to continue to improve ourselves? Do we feel independent? Is it because we have good communication? Well, all of these things that I've talked about actually start in the brain. If we think about it, we can't teach a skill to make someone interested. What we can do as parents and as educators and as professionals, we can provide experiences that we find interesting, that we think the person we're working with will be interested in, but we can't make them be interested. And likewise, we can't teach strategies to understand all people. We can provide certain strategies that may work to help us work with some people, but we can't have strategies to work with people across our whole lifespan. That's not possible. So, and likewise, we can't make someone have a growth mindset. Again, we can create experiences and we can teach some strategies, but we can't make it happen. And why is that? Because all focus and confidence and emotional resilience happen in the brain. So for a moment, and this is where you need to get your keyboards out, I want you to have a look at this particular setting. As adults, we walk into settings like this all the time. I want you to imagine yourself walking into this setting as confident, as focused, and as a resilient person. And what I'd like you to do is write in the chat, what are you doing when you're going into that particular situation? And how does it feel? Pop that in the chat and let's have a look at that. Anyone want to share what that feels like or what you're doing when you walk into that particular setting? So you feel capable and you feel at ease and you feel ready. That's great. Anyone else? Aha, that's a good observation of yourself. So you're wondering who you can speak to and you're working out what are you going to say, and fabulous. Someone's smiling, feeling happy, and you feel good. And you're looking for a familiar face. That's excellent. Aha, someone's looking for a group of friends. And then you'll be happy. Okay. Someone's feeling collaborative and ready. We do have a couple of people that feel a little anxious or nervous going into that particular setting. Someone's thinking if they belong into that situation. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing those feelings. Okay, so hold on to that now. And now I'm going to ask you to go into a different setting. I want you to imagine you're a student and you're walking into a school setting. But you're a student, and this is a school setting. You're walking in the playground first thing in the morning. You've got to go into the building. You've got to go onto the playground. It's the start of your day. But you're a student that lacks confidence. You're a student that lacks focus. Or you're a student that lacks resilience. Now think about that for a moment. Put yourself into that situation and tell me what you're doing in that circumstance and how you feel about that. Pop that in the chat. Someone's feeling unsure, scared, nervous about what the day will look like, anxious. Someone wants to go home straight away because it's a familiar place at home, a safe place. Someone's wondering, will anyone play with me? Or will they like me? Someone's feeling nervous, shy, and maybe a little lost. Again, thank you for sharing that. These are familiar feelings. We've all been in these situations in our life where we haven't really felt confident, focused, or resilient. Now I'd like to hear from the founder of the Arrowsmith Program, who had severe learning difficulties prior to her developing groundbreaking work. But let's hear from her.
My world was a series of disconnected bits and pieces of unrelated fragments. And eventually, my fragmented view of the world ended up causing a very fragmented sense of myself. I felt incredible shame. I felt there was something horribly, horribly wrong with me. And in my child's mind, when I'd heard that diagnosis of having a mental block, I actually thought I had a wooden cube in my head that made learning difficult. And I didn't have a piece of wood in my head, but I wasn't far wrong. I had blockages, as I was later to learn, in very critical parts of my brain.
So we can hear that, Barbara's experience of herself and going to school and how she felt about herself, and that confidence and that resilience wasn't there. What I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about behavior. It's almost like a sideline, but I tell you why I included this in this presentation. So many questions that came through from you around this topic were related to behavior. So I wanted to just touch on that for a moment. Because as I reflected on this topic in preparation and on your questions, I started thinking about adults and children, any of us who sometimes don't feel confident, who actually all the time don't feel confident, who lack focus or who lack resilience. I couldn't help but think about children in particular, especially the ones that I've worked with, and my own child. So, and I thought about how do they communicate that they are feeling that way? Just like when you walked into that playground that I asked you to walk into, and you recognized those feelings that you might feel as you walk in. Children in particular, but also adults, express those feelings and those emotions through behavior. Sometimes we don't really like to observe those behaviors as teachers and as parents. And sometimes the behaviors are not always there, which makes sense because they only turn up in certain situations or with certain people or in certain environments. Sometimes those behaviors feel totally uncharacteristic. Sometimes they come out of the blue and we go, where is this coming from? I'm going to hand over now to Emma. Emma is going to talk to us today about Lamia. Lamia is a student at TDCC, and Emma's going to tell us how she used to show up in the world. So Emma, I'll hand over to you to tell Lamia's story right now.
Thanks, Debbie. So Lamia's story was she found navigating the world very, very difficult. She was very emotional. She would often have meltdowns, and these could be over the smallest of things. She wouldn't be able to regulate herself, and she would find herself quite stressed, quite anxious. She was homeschooled because she was getting lost in class, and socially she wasn't being accepted. She was an overthinker, and her reality was very different from what was actually going on around her in the world. Her self-confidence was at an all-time low. She didn't really like to try new things. She didn't like to be without adult support. She didn't really like to hang about with her peers. She didn't even like to hang about with her family. She struggled on family holidays, often causing what looked like disruption, almost like she was angry as well. She didn't quite know herself. She would copy people, thinking that was the way that people wanted her to be. She was very lost, and it was a shame to see her. So that was Lamia before.
Thanks so much, Emma, for telling that story. I'm wondering if the people that we have with us in the webinar today have experienced something like that, either as a teacher, as a professional, a therapist, or indeed with your own child. So, and I don't want to linger in this space, but I do feel like it's really important for us to recognize these behaviors that we see, that we experience with our own children. So I've asked here on this slide, if you feel confident or if you feel you want to share this, what behaviors have you seen show up in yourself or in someone you know? Because some of these behaviors could be described as fight, flight, or freeze. Those three words may be familiar to you. And sometimes we see these behaviors as acting out or being one of these three things: fight, flight, or freeze. Pop in the chat if you've experienced, or someone that you know or someone you love or work with have experienced these types of behaviors. Let's see what people are saying. Does anyone want to share any of the behaviors that you've experienced with someone? Aha, here they come. Freezing and refusing to attempt an activity as they're nervous of getting it wrong. Okay, so someone may be lacking confidence there. Roaming around the class with no reason, lacking focus. Shuts down, gets angry and abusive. That's that fight instinct. refusing to attempt, saying no to everything. Thank you again for sharing some of those. And I'm fairly certain all of us in here have experienced this in one way or another. Sometimes it could even be in the supermarket or at a picnic where you wouldn't expect things like this to happen. But we've experienced these types of behaviors. Someone said, oh, a behavior comes out as rudeness or being contrary. These are all really good examples. Thank you so much for sharing these things. Because these all happen in the brain. All of those behaviors start in the brain. You may already know this, but we have a part of our brain called the amygdala. And it is the part of our brain that regulates emotions like fear and aggression. It ties emotion to memories. So also when you're being rewarded, that's an emotion. It all happens in the amygdala there. It can also impact decision making. So when someone is feeling insecure or they lack focus because of all the stimulation that's in their environment, or they're uncertain about what's happening around them, the amygdala is on high alert. It is switched on all the time. Because if you're not understanding the world around you, you don't know what's going to come at you next. You don't know you can't predict how that person's going to react with you. You can't predict what's going to happen when you go in that playground. You lack so much confidence or resilience that your amygdala is on high alert the whole time. So that fight, flight, or freeze potential is very high in behaviors, and we always stay vigilant and alert to that. So again, this is all happening in our brain. These behaviors, emotional, confidence, self-worth is all happening there. Now, we all have walked into scenarios like this. Sorry, I'm asking you to walk into lots of scenarios today. I was recently in New York City, so I chose this picture on the left because you walk into that city and it's like, whoa, what's happening here? And what is our brain doing? Our brain is sifting through all of the information. In this picture here on the left, you can almost hear the sounds that is happening in that scenario. You can hear the people, you can hear the cars. There's a lot of stimulation happening in that. Have a look at the classroom. When children walk into classrooms, they're fantastic places. This is such an inviting classroom here. People look happy, they're engaged, there's lots of beautiful, and it's a beautiful environment. But what's happening in our brain? Well, we have large-scale brain networks, and here are some of them. These are not the only ones. But this is what helps us in the focus area. Okay, so we have the default mode, how our brain operates most of the time. It's thinking. So our default mode, we're thinking all the time. But then we need help from the dorsal attention network. And that is sifting through what's going on here. So it's trying to help us understand what's going on in the environment. So walk into a New York City setting or you walk into a classroom setting, your brain is thinking, what is going on here? I have to understand this. The salience network is trying to sift out, at the same time, it's trying to sift out what's important here. What do I need to focus on here? And put aside everything else. Put aside the taxi, the billboard, the sounds I'm hearing. I've got to cross the road safely. So the brain focuses, the salience network helps us focus on that. And then the executive control, the prefrontal cortex is telling us how we got to respond. How do we respond to this environment? So it's planning and organizing how we're going to act. So we have these brain networks that absolutely have to be working at their strongest capacity to help us go through our lives. And this is happening in every moment of our lives, not just once we walk onto a busy street, not once we just walk into a school playground. These brain networks are working in every part of our day to navigate through the house, through the shopping center. They're happening all the time, walking into a setting of adults. What we know about the brain, and there's been research from researchers at the Southern Illinois University who put these slides together when they were doing some research on the Arrowsmith program. They found that these large brain networks, these default, the dorsal attention, the salience, and the frontoparietal networks, looked like this for people that did not have learning difficulties. So you see there on that scale, there's there's a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of green. It's kind of middle of the road if you look at that scale on there, that color scale. But have a look at what's happening in the brain of people with learning difficulties. It's either up to the right where it is hyper-connected. So there's lots of red and orange. Or it's right down the other end where it's hypo-connected. And this makes sense if you think about it. For someone that struggles doing something, and this could be walking into that setting or doing homework or being asked to do a particular task, what we know about people that struggle in some things is that the brain will overcompensate. Some parts of the brain will overcompensate. So it will come in and do a task, but it's really hard, but the brain is churning. So the person feels like they're working extra hard to do that particular task. And what's happening here is that's what's happening in the brain. We can see that there. So there's sections of the brain that are absolutely working more than they should because other areas are weak in the brain. And so they can't be engaged to do the task. What the researchers found after an academic year for some students and participants, or for after a 6-week intensive period, which is what Lamia actually did, what they saw in the brain imaging is that the networks calmed down. So you see here, you see that they kind of went back to the middle. There's not so much red, there's not so much blue. They calmed down. And that's what we see. So the researchers found that the underconnected areas of these networks were strengthened, and it reduced the hyperconnectivity. So it came back into balance. Everything calmed down. So what is happening there? What is happening in the brain? Let's hear from Barbara again.
So this incredibly complex organ that we carry with us everywhere we go, it does shape who we are. It is a filter. It filters our perceptions and our understanding of ourselves, of others, of our world, and of our place in that world.
Now, when we look at this scenario, you've already stepped into this scenario as an adult, as a confident adult, let's have a look at what we're asking our brain to do. We're asking it to scan the room. Some people talked about this in their chat. Scanning the room, and you're looking for a familiar face. We're asking the brain to remember the names of people. Do you know them? How did you meet them? What connection do you have to them? You're planning small chat in your brain. What am I going to say when I step into this room? And then you actually start chatting. You're asking the brain to do that all simultaneously. You're having friendly chat. You might even have a friendly debate. You might focus on the conversation and put out all of the distractions. So really asking that attention network to be very focused on the conversation that you're having. These are all cognitive functions of the brain. These are not the only cognitive functions we have, but these are what we're calling on to perform well for us when we step into that setting. And when our brain performs well, we feel confident and we know we can focus, which then helps our emotional resilience. So what are some of these cognitive functions? Exactly what are they doing in our brain? So we have terms for this, and they don't work in isolation. We have to remember that not one of these are working in isolation. We call on many, many different cognitive functions of the brain when we're doing any task. So stepping into that scenario as an adult, what we're asking our brain to do, we use the cognitive function of symbol relations. Probably the most important cognitive function that we use in our everyday lives, because this cognitive function is responsible for understanding and connecting ideas. It helps us understand the relationships, not just between people, but between concepts. So this understanding what's happening in the world, you see this happen, you see this happen, you connect those happenings together. It makes a concept. You know this, you know that, but together it forms a relationship in whatever it is that we're doing. So symbol relations is critically important to our lives, and we really need that working very strongly. So yes, it helps us understand the why of things. Quite often, children who don't have this function working in a strong, they don't ask the question why, actually. So symbol relations helps us understand the world, as I said. It helps us understand ourselves, actually. If this is, I feel this is happening to me, why is that happening to me? And you start understanding how you're reacting. In fact, quite often people who have this underperforming find it difficult to access therapy, because in therapy we want to see a cause and effect. You have to understand how that one action impacts another action. And if this cognitive function is not strong, then that the therapist has quite a difficult time with a person trying to help them understand that this action caused this reaction. So symbol relations is absolutely critical in that process. It also helps us with perspective taking. It also helps us with conversations, with what we're reading, stepping into that environment that we saw there. So symbol relations, very critical cognitive function. Then we have predicative speech. Predicative speech is helping us predict the sequential logic of what will happen. So it is the sequential logic of language and procedures. So when you walk into a room, you'll see a lot of people there, and you might be able to go and get there's a sequence of steps that you'll go into that room. We have symbolic thinking in the prefrontal cortex, part of the executive functioning. This helps us plan and organize what we're going to say when we go into a place, how we're going to navigate this language space. And then we have memory for information and instruction. And we have object recognition. So two different parts of memory, one remembering different chunks of information, one remembering objects, which includes faces. So we might be really good at remembering chunks of information, but our memory might be really poor when it comes to objects. Sometimes we feel that, I have a really good memory. Well, actually you have a memory for X, but not for Y. So that's why it's so important that we have a look at these underlying cognitive functions of all of the actions that we have. Now, as I said, These are the main cognitive functions that we use when we go into that room, but it's not always, they're not the only ones that we're using, and we're using them all at the same time. We're not isolating them in a particular situation. What's happening when we ask our children to go into the school playground or into school? I'm going to show this in a different way. These are the cognitive functions that Arrowsmith can strengthen, and you can look at this information on our website. But when we're asking students to learn an academic curriculum, we want them, which is why we send our children to school, we are calling on so many different cognitive functions. And if we want our children to be confident, it's always great if these cognitive functions are working at their optimal level, or at least in a strong way, maybe not superior, but in an average way. And these all work differently in our brains, but we're asking many cognitive functions to be strong in order to learn an academic curriculum. But when we ask our children to go to school in the morning, we're also really hoping that they make and that they keep friends. So what are the cognitive functions that we're calling on there? We're calling on these ones, that planning and processing in language, the memory of information, the sequential logic, and again, symbol relations. We also expect our children to follow rules and instructions at school. So what is implied there? Again, you'll see the same cognitive functions coming up here, and there's a different one here, auditory speech discrimination, because that helps us hear the different parts of speech. And then we also want them to navigate playgrounds and hallways and sports fields. What does that look like? Again, you'll see other cognitive functions pop up here. These all need to be working strongly for a student to step into that playground. Here you'll see that spatial reasoning cognitive function, because that helps us navigate space. We see the kinesthetic perception. Where is our body in space? And primary motor, climbing that jungle gym there requires that. So I hope that you see that by enhancing these cognitive functions, or enhancing the brain, brings about that confidence, that focus, and emotional resilience. It's so important to see these behaviors, to see these concepts with what I call a cognitive lens. So overlaying a cognitive lens on these concepts is really important. The good news is that we can strengthen these cognitive functions with very targeted cognitive programs because of neuroplasticity. It's fantastic. The brain can change, and it can change across our lifespan. So when I'm talking about programs like this or these cognitive functions, these can all be strengthened right across our lifespan, because neuroplasticity happens in our brain right across our lifespan. The brain can change all the way through our lives. I think our oldest participant in our program has been 85, because what scientists know now is the brain can change. It's fantastic. It's also important to remember that we all have unique cognitive profiles. We've seen that in our work and in assessments, and we know this. Just like our fingerprints are different, our brains are different. And we have these cognitive functions. We do not have them all working at average or superior. Some will be underperforming, and then we have this scale of performance, and the permutations of how those cognitive functions work and interact together either makes us confident and focused and resilient, or if the combination, if some of these critical cognitive functions are underperforming, we feel a little, we lack confidence and focus and resilience in certain situations, not in all situations. So it's because of the tasks our brain is being asked to do. So now I'm going to hand back to Emma, to tell the second part of Lamia's story. As I said before, Lamia did the Symbol Relations Cognitive Intensive Program, not this summer, the summer before. And Emma now is going to tell us how Lamia showed up in the world after that. Over to you, Emma.
Okay, so after Lamia completed it, immediately after the 6 weeks, we seen that she was starting to be able to emotionally cope better. She was able to be around her, so she's one of five, she's got 4 siblings. She was able to be around them and able to manage her own emotions, whereas before she would really get dysregulated. She wouldn't be able to cope because she wouldn't understand that other people have needs, and she felt her needs had to be met first, and she was very demanding on both her mum and dad. But after doing Arrowsmith, she was able to start understanding that, like Debbie said, the like compare and contrast, like think, okay, this happens because of this. She was able to then regulate her emotions. She was more confident in herself, and she was able to understand that if certain things didn't happen the way she visioned, there was alternative things that might happen as well, and that was okay. And she was able to see the bigger picture rather than just seeing the one thing, one picture. She was also able to have a bit of self-belief and confidence. So the great thing is Lamia was homeschooled, and after 4 years, this year she returned back to school. She is thriving. She has had no meltdowns. She's been back at school for 3 weeks. She's doing absolutely amazing. She is doing A-levels, which even herself, I think she pinches herself every now and again that she's doing the things that she loves. She's making friends. She's been accepted into her peer group without anybody judging her. Obviously, she still has the usual teen drama, but when the teen dramas came along, she's able to cope with it better. She's able to understand people's different perspectives. She understands people's different emotions, whereas before she couldn't quite understand that. She's also able to self-advocate for herself. She's able to tell, okay, I'm not quite understanding what I've done wrong here. Can you explain it to me? She's able to do a lot of things. Also in the summer, she went, for the first time, she went to camp on her own to Scotland, and she was booked up for 2 weeks, and she phoned her parents and said, I want to stay for another 2 weeks. And it was now the parents' turn to be anxious because they were like, are you sure you're going to cope? She's like, yeah, I'm doing amazing. I've made loads of friends. I'm doing lots of things. I'm more independent. I'm happy. I'm confident. Just the wee girl that we seen before was a totally different person. It's like night and day. If you'd met Lamia before and met her after, you wouldn't think she was the same person. And she's just content, thriving, and honestly doing amazing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for telling her story, Emma. It really is a testament to how that brain change can bring around increased confidence, focus, and resilience. It's just, it's fantastic.
I'll just
Thank you
add
so
one
much. Yeah,
thing
sure.
as
Sure.
well. So Lamia had a complex cognitive profile previous to Arrowsmith, low average on a lot of things, and never above average, average or low average. Then she recently, from going back to school, she had her new educational psychology report, and she doesn't present in the same way that she did before. She presents as average or sometimes above average. She doesn't have the same labels as well because Arrowsmith has stripped back some of those things that she struggled with academically and socially. She doesn't do it anymore. So, like just now, she doesn't present as being dyslexic because of our brain is functioning at a better capacity. So I just wanted to add to that.
Thank you so much for adding that, Emma. It's true. All of these things start in the brain. And so, yeah, her story is fantastic. It is not unusual. This is not unusual for an Arrowsmith student. But thank you, Emma, so much for telling her story. It's not unusual because the researchers have also seen it. Researchers across many, many different universities have seen these. And I highlight these outcomes today. Obviously, it's on our topic, But what the researchers have seen is after an academic year in Arrowsmith, or that intensive program that actually puts an academic year into 6 weeks for one particular cognitive function, that one that I said is the most important and critical in our lives, symbol relations. This is what researchers have seen. They have seen positive changes in well-being and social emotional intelligence in these ways, a greater sense of happiness and well-being. They've seen a greater sense of locus of control, just like Lamia was saying, I have control here. I can do things now, so they feel confident. Because if you lack confidence and you're always needing someone to help you, you don't feel like you have that control over your life. But after increasing the cognitive capacity of our brain, you get that control. Researchers have seen that incremental theory of mind, that growth mindset, that increase in that growth mindset, go from I can't to I can. They've seen an increase in emotional intelligence, in their overall mood. They've seen an increase in optimism and self-esteem. They've seen a reduction in hyperactivity because now they're able to understand around them, they're able to focus. And so that fight, flight, or freeze activity, or those behaviors, are lessening. The amygdala calms down. They've seen an increase in social skills, in adaptability, and in leadership. Again, all of these happen in the brain. We can provide students with the ability to show us their social skills, or show us their leadership, or show us their adaptability, but we can't give them strategies to increase it. Actually, this happens in the brain. The researchers have seen an increase in attention, listening, and staying focused. Again, if you think about those large brain scale networks I talked about, if we're increasing those, this is why the researchers see these outcomes. And we see, if you're understanding the world about you, around you better, if you feel more focused and more confident, they see the reduction in depression, anxiety, and aggression. And they see a reduction in cortisol in the brain, the stress hormone. So we know that everything calms down. Just like Emma explained, they saw that in Lamia's behavior, it's calming down. What else did the researchers see? You see the changes in the brain activation. They saw changes in within the brain connectivity, the network connectivity, and then between the networks. So it's really important, both of those. And so this is what they saw, that strengthened neural connectivity within those 4 large networks that I mentioned. And then, not to labor on this, and you'll get the recording of this and it's on our website, but they've seen increases in the cognitive function on these cognitive domains and on these academic achievement markers, all on standardized measures. So again, we see that confidence grow in our children through strengthening the brain. And you've heard me talk about Arrowsmith and our work. What is it? If you're curious, it's a cognitive program. It's been around for 47 years. It's researched. It's got a lot of data behind it. It's evidence-based. It uses the principles of neuroplasticity, as I mentioned, to change the brain. And it makes the brain learn more efficiently and effectively. And it's around the world. Now I'm going to hand over to Emma to talk about Arrowsmith at TDCC.
Hi, everybody. So we are lucky enough to have Arrowsmith at TDCC. We also now have 6 teachers that are able to provide. It's an online class, which is great because then children, adults, anybody that wants to do the programme can do it from the comfort of their own home, and they don't need to travel anywhere for it. So if you want to hear more, we offer quite a few different time classes. We've got some in the morning as early as 7 a.m. and we've got some as late as 6 p.m. You can be from 6 years old right up until any age. One of our oldest clients just now is 62 years old. It's never too late to change the brain. So to get involved, Debbie's displayed our contact details. You can WhatsApp or send an email. There's also on our website, you can take a questionnaire that gives you an idea of how your brain is learning. It's not the same as an assessment. We do a very thorough assessment at TDCC through Arrowsmith, and we're able to assess all the cognitive functions and see your cognitive profile, your individual one, and see what's happening in your brain. Then from there, we would give you an individualised programme where we would start you on your cognitive function with our very well trained teachers. And you would start on your journey. And then we ask that 3-4 months down the line, it's not a quick fix programme, that's what I will say. And 3-4 months down the line, you might start to see some very small changes. But we like to celebrate these because that becomes the new normal. And before long, we forget what the things that we struggled with. So we celebrate the wins as we go. And it's really an amazing programme. We are very thankful to have it. And so if you're interested, please get in touch. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emma. And now it's time for me to get to your questions. As I mentioned, I really thank you for your questions that you sent through because it really helped me shape my webinar today. And what I saw come through were roughly these 4 categories. If you have any more that have come up today, please pop them in the chat. I can't promise to get to them now, just looking at the time, but Mylene can send them through and I can send some information back. But what I've tried to do today is capture your questions in these categories. Around behavior. Many questions came through about how can we change behavior. What I've attempted to do today, I haven't given practical strategies here, but what I've tried to do is give you a cognitive lens on those behaviors. I find that if we have that cognitive lens on the behavior, if you look underneath the behavior, that as adults, if we're working with children or other adults, we can understand the behaviors better and we can respond differently and with more compassion. Of course, there will be need to change those behaviors. You need to increase the brain's capacity because we have to look at what is underlying those behaviors. That cognitive questionnaire that Emma talked about is a really good way to understand what is happening in the brain. So that's how I've approached this behavior aspect, because as I mentioned early on, I can give you strategies to change behavior, but it's only going to be that behavior in that setting, in that circumstance. It's not going to be changing behavior across all settings for a lifetime. So this is, by changing the brain, we do change it for a lifetime. That's why it's so important. Many questions came through about, as parents and as teachers and professionals, how can I help this, or how can I support this? Again, I've tried to give you a cognitive lens there, because to support us in our roles, we have to see what's underlying, what's happening in the brain that shows someone, that is making someone lack confidence in this particular situation, or lacking focus, or lacking emotional resilience. I do want to say this, that any child that struggles and gets up every day and goes to school shows enormous resilience, because every day we ask them, we make them go to a setting that makes them anxious, that puts that amygdala on high alert. So that shows enormous resilience to me. Sometimes people forget that. So I just wanted to mention that. I also, people wanted, strategies around building and strengthening confidence, focus, and resilience. Again, how do we improve those aspects of our lives? We improve it through strengthening our cognitive capacity. It all starts in the brain. And Emma talked about this, but emotional dysregulation. This is where we see these behaviors. People can't manage their behaviors. It's because they're on fight, flight, or freeze. It is because there's underlying cognitive capacities that need to be strengthened. Because, as Emma talked about in Lamia's story, it happens in the brain. When you are not understanding the world, and Barbara talked about in her life, if you're not understanding the world, if you don't know what's going to come at you next, our emotions are high. That fight, flight, or freeze is there all the time. And how do we calm that down? We understand the world better. We become more confident and more focused. And how do we do that? We do that by changing the brain. And it's not just for now that we're changing the brain. This brain change lasts a lifetime. So I hope that you can join me for my next webinar. But I did want to point out, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, last year I did 2 webinars for TDCC, one on helping kids focus and one on emotional intelligence. These are available on this link here that you see here. So I've particularly focused on these aspects separately. So I thought you might be interested in going back and having a look at those, where I really delve into them in more detail and look at the underlying cognitive functions on each of those aspects. So you might be interested in having a look at that. And join us on November 14, when we're going to look at learning and behavior in children who learn differently. So I'm a little bit over the time. Sorry, Mylin, but I will pause now. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you again for this beautiful presentation. And thank you also, Emma, for sharing Lamia's journey. That was very beautiful. And yes, once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And yes, join us again for the next webinar happening on September 26 with our topic, Understanding Dyslexia Assessments. Have a wonderful day.
Hello? Hello?